Welcome back to War Thunder and welcome to the tank review on the American Rank 4 battle rating 6.7 American heavy tank, the T34. The T34 complements the already really awesome American 6.7 line of tanks throughout all kind of designations. From fantastic light tanks to capable medium tanks to heavy tanks and also tank destroyers in the tech tree and the premium variety. You have a really capable lineup together with the ground forces support for from the aircraft rather, namely the 82 Skyraider and also the A26 B50 and numerous other aircraft. You have a very capable lineup. But a tank review is always on one tank for very good reason. Maybe you see this tank for the first time on the battlefield, or you just unlocked it and don't know how to use it properly, and also which kind of upgrades you want to go for first. All this and also a comparison to its major opponents on the battlefield, together with some ace tanker gameplay in arcade and realistic, shall be part of this tank review. So let's get right into it. As usual, I want to begin with the armor, and the armor is overall very similar to the premium version, the T29. However, there are some very important differences and I want to point them out. First of all, the lower plate is indeed a weak spot, and there was an update recently that also made it very important that you know about this. The lower plate, just 70.25 millimeters of thickness, and the angles change. If you can avoid it, don't try to shoot the middle part of it, as it is sloped at nearly 59 degrees, where lower caliber AP and APHE rounds can and will bounce from time to time, despite the effective thickness just being 163 millimeters. The overall penetration values are around about 200 plus millimeters at this battle rating, so you still can penetrate here, but from time to time you will bounce. The left and right side of the lower plate are much better for penetration purposes, and yeah, the effective thickness varies from 80, 83 to 100 millimeters, so even lower BR vehicles can reliably penetrate this if you aim for the sides of the lower plate. The upper plate is 102 millimeters thick at 55 degrees of angling, and that gives an effective thickness, depending on the exact angle, of around about 150, 155, 160 millimeters. And that is there where we have the pure plating without any kind of changes. Goes even up to 170 millimeters, and those are the additional tracks that give you a lot of additional protection, especially from HESH shells if you're fighting the British in a slight up tier facing the 105 millimeter HESH L7A1 gun on the Centurion Mark 10. It will not go through there. The additional tracks act as kind of additional spaced armor, and they will absorb the HESH effect. The machine gun port is also here around this area rather flat, so that is good for penetrating here. However, it's a chancy shot, because if you miss it, you get here into increased angles that will bounce your shots, and also this machine gun protecting sphere can go into extreme angles at the edges, 365 millimeters, you will not penetrate it. So that is the front plate. However, there is a bit more left, and that is, for example, that the deck armor of the entire tank is 38.1 millimeters. That is really not that bad, but at this part here it's a bit bent down, so you can actually hit it, and if your caliber is large enough, for example a Russian 122 millimeters, you have a fair chance of interacting with the armor, or simply overmatch it, penetrate here and do massive amounts of damage to the tank. This part here is 127 millimeters thick. It looks like an inviting weak spot, but it isn't, because of extreme angles up to 86 degrees. You will not penetrate here. Then let's talk about the side armor, and the side armor is overall 76.2 millimeters, at the front part here up until the end of the fighting compartment, and on the or at the engine part it's 51 millimeters. That means, like with the T29, you should not really try to side scrape as it is sometimes advertised with the Tiger H1. The Tiger H1 has, for example, 80 millimeters of side armor, and at its battle rating it even has a lot of trouble angling to big effectiveness. But that's not all. We have additional structural steel of chassis, additional tracks. They sometimes absorb some shots like on every other tank. But the belly here is a bit visible with 25.4 millimeters. That is, you know, a lot of AAAs can now penetrate there and on the engine part or engine compartment. The crew compartment is more or less protected from 40mm AAAs or even the Coelian, but higher tier AAAs they can shoot through if they have HRAP rounds or APDS or APCR, whatever they shoot. So yeah, the side is not really that convincing. Then the rear is 51 millimeters, and also this part here, but it's surprisingly effectively angled at 60 degrees, so be careful where you exactly shoot. Again, with AAAs, try to shoot here. Again, the engine deck is 38.1 millimeters, like the top of the turret here. And yeah, then let's talk about the turret. Let's begin with the side. The side is 158.7 millimeters. That is actually pretty good for a non-Russian turret. And you can see it's a huge target. It's rather flat. However, at certain parts, like here where it begins to go into some angling, you suddenly get effective thicknesses of up to 300 millimeters. And you wonder why you can't penetrate here with your Jagdtiger or with your tank being equipped with the German Long 88 or even sometimes a British 20-pounder. And yeah, that is symmetrical. And the back of the turret is 102 millimeters thick, but there is an additional plate of 101 millimeters. And that is a decisive difference to the T29, which does not have this additional plate. Again, it acts like additional spaced armor and absorbs the effect of any kind of HESH shell, but it will splash down through the rather thin 38.1mm deck armor and set just simply the engine and the fuel tanks on fire, with a good chance to just simply blow it up. Then we come to the front of the tank, and there we will draw the major comparison to the T29. Now again, the turret looks very similar, and indeed to the overwhelming parts it is similar. The turret front of the gun mantle, so to speak, is 203 millimeters thick, like on the T29, but then we come to the differences, because here this gunner's viewport has no armor whatsoever. And that is very surprisingly, especially when we compare it to the extremely powerful optics on the IS-6, for example. That absorbs APCR, APHE, any kind of shell that you know is not like a chieftain, and even the chieftain's APDS sometimes gets absorbed. There is absolutely no armor, so you can kill the gunner with light machine guns from the front of a heavy tank. There is absolutely no protection. However, when we move a little bit to the side, we also can see that with that you can damage the gun breech. However, it takes a while up until it gets, you know, out of commission. If you look a little bit further into that, you see the additional 20mm spall shield, and that is not visible on the T29. So the effective combined thickness here is 223 millimeters, and suddenly the Long 88 has from around about 300 to 400 meters severe problems penetrating here with the APHE, not even talking about the Russians 122 millimeter APHE rounds. For example, let's look at here at the T29, again 203, but here is 38.1 millimeters, so the gunner's viewport has armor, but again you can penetrate it with AAA, so it's not that much of a difference. Another thing that I want to point out is this part here, 178 millimeters above 158 millimeters. So yeah, the T34 here doesn't have this. It's just 158 millimeters. But you can see we have a lot of overlay, especially with an additional 305 millimeter frame on this gun mantle, together with this additional 50 millimeter plating around it, which is kind of the gun holding, I guess, or the gun mantle holding rather. Then, you know, the turret is a bit rounded towards the front, which is not so important for this part here. You can see the effective thickness is 240 millimeters, so heat rounds still can penetrate here, but more importantly, even APHE rounds can penetrate here. So if you shoot with the machine guns at the viewport of the gunner of a T34 after he has fired, more on this in a moment, he tries to wiggle his turret, might expose a little bit the part here, and you can fire here with a good old APHE shell from the IS-2, the IS-6, the IS-3s, the King Tigers and old German long 88s, and also the 20-pounder will penetrate here with the stock shell. And yeah, there you can penetrate here a little bit more inwards, and you kind of have the same thickness. You know, the thickness here is not bigger. Trying to shot trap this tank or trying to go here is a chancy shot in comparison, and the turret front area where you can reliably penetrate if you have enough penetration is this part here, around about here, and here, as long as you don't have to hit the 50 caliber machine guns. So this part here is actually also a part where you can penetrate the tank, but please don't try to overmatch the roof or try to go for the cupola, because you just most cases will not go through. So then let's talk about the interior, and again certain changes. First of all, the crew. We have 6 crew members in total. We have the machine gunner, the driver, one loader on the right hand side, one loader on the left hand side, and a gunner on the left hand side, together with the commander sitting in the back of the turret very high up. And yeah, then we see a lot of ammunition. I will talk about this in a moment. Then also the engine with the transmission and the fuel tanks is everything situated in the back of the vehicle. They love to burn, and sometimes they also blow up, but it's not very drastic in terms of blowing up. So I talked about the lower plate. And with the introduction of the T29, a lot of people said, well, why are you complaining about this tank? Just shoot the lower plate. But they didn't do that themselves, and that was because there was kind of, let's call it a bug or a feature, whatever, and APHE shell penetrated here or in the lower plate and just detonated around about here, but all the shrapnels got kind of absorbed by an invisible wall, and yeah, no damage to the ammunition. Even heat shells went right through and did no damage. But now the ammunition will blow up. So you also have to take note of that. Overall, you have 34 rounds. That is not an awful amount of ammunition. And you can see you have a lot of ammunition also stored in the back. 6 propellant charges in the turret, and overall 12 warheads in the back of the turret, and 2 are here. So that means you just simply have to remove 11 rounds and your turret is free of any kind of ammunition. It also will take out a few propellant charges from here, which is important because the middle ammo rack is the one that blows up the most. And I had incidences where a King Tiger shot my turret front at close ranges, penetrated here, and one fragment went down and it blew up. I felt like in a King Tiger myself when my fuel tank blows up, but that's another story. So then you also have to think about how many rounds in total you want to take with you. Again, the most important part is that you take out 11. So overall, the survivability, as long as your ammunition doesn't explode, is actually pretty good. You have 6 crew members. The tank is practically fully operational with 2, because you have the gunner, the loader benefit. You have 2 loaders for 2-staged ammunition. That means even if you're down to 2 crew members, you keep nearly your full crew reload, and that's certainly an advantage. So that's the armor, that's the interior, and I have to say the armor is really good for 6.7, but now it's more or less bug free. and the survivability is as well really good. The tank is huge, it's the size of a King Tiger, but the crew compartment is even bigger as on the King Tiger, and you will not see any kind of fuel detonation when you get hit in your fighting compartment. Also, here you can see there is a lot of empty space where heat shells and AP and APCR shells will go through without doing too much damage, unlike for example in the King Tiger. So hide your lower plate and try to go hull down and try to stay at distance, and that's your best chance in this tank. Overall, the tank performs really well, as we'll see in a moment. The next part that I want to talk about is the mobility. The mobility of a heavy tank is very often not so impressive, and the T34 really is not the best in this comparison, but it's not disastrous, and that is very surprising when you look at the color scheme. The T34 has the second strongest engine in this comparison with 810 horsepower, which it kind of shares with the Carnarvon. Just the 10.5 cm Tiger II in this comparison has the strongest engine, but you are also the third heaviest tank with 65.8 tons. And that leads to the direct comparison to the premium version, the T29, which has a weaker engine by 40 horsepower, but also is with 1.6 tons lighter, with 64.2. It's 1.6 tons lighter. Now the horsepower to ton ratio is 12.3 for the T34 and 12.0 for the T29, and that is just a 2.6% difference. But the effect on the battlefield is a whole new world. Why? Well, one of the major criticisms that I had on the T29 was the lack of maneuverability. It took ages to go around and to just corner something. And even stock, the T34 just feels more nimble than the T29, which is very surprising. And that has to do with the, again, maneuverability. And it's not really something that you can catch into numbers, but it seems like the shifting of the gears is a bit more smoother on the T34 than it is on the T29. Then the top speed is a disastrous 33 kilometers an hour. That's even one less than the Carnarvon, which is known for its lack of speed. Also, the reverse speed is by far the lowest, by far. Minus 8 kilometers an hour is not really fast. But with all the other tanks except the IS-6, you have neutral steering, which kind of, improves things. So the top speed is not bad, and sometimes you really feel the lack of top speed because the horsepower to ton ratio is not that bad. But let's talk about this a little bit more. The top speed is really bad. So especially against the IS-6, you lose completely. But the IS-6, together with the 10.5 centimeter King Tiger, to a certain degree, they feel like a little bit like medium tanks. Together with the T32, I have to hasten to add, which is also held back by the lack of top speed. So yeah, you can look at the stats yourself, but you really have to drive the tank yourself to understand what I'm talking about. So then let's talk about the business end. Let's talk about the gun. When we talk about the firepower of the T32, we first have to talk about the caliber. And yes, caliber matters when we talk about armor interaction rules and overmatch mechanics and so on. Caliber really reduces the chance of bouncing and also the amount of penetrations that you get. Simple as that. It's not just the raw penetration that counts against flat armor, it also depends on how you retain this penetration over distance and also how you interact with armor. So, a 120mm gun at 6.7 is in this comparison the largest, and you can see the difference to the other tanks here. Just the IS-6 at 7.0 has a higher caliber, just with 122mm, and the 90mm on the T32 performs not really that greatly. The 105mm on both the T29 and the 10.5 centimeter Tiger II are your closest rivals in terms of performance. Your actual German 6.7 counterpart, the Tiger II HSLA 16, is a completely different manner, like the Carnarvon. We will come to this in a moment. So, the fantastic T53 cannon on the T34 in the caliber of 120mm just can launch 34 shells. That's the second lowest in comparison to the IS-6 with just 30. And remember, you should take out 11 rounds, so you're left with 23 rounds. The reload is, yeah, it's interesting. 14.9 seconds is something that you expect for this kind of caliber, but if you look at the comparison to the T32's 90mm, it becomes painfully obvious how shafted the T32 is. You just have a 0.4 second loading advantage on an A screw with the T32 for a massively smaller gun. Then the T29 actually has a 2.4 second loading advantage. You actually beat both the IS-6 and the 10.5 centimeter Tiger II, which is interesting. The IS-6 is one of the best performing 122mm guns in terms of reload, and the 10.5 centimeter Tiger II is advertised as having actually a auto-loading mechanism, which is actually not implemented in the game. But now we have to talk about your actual battle rating regular counterparts in both the German and the British tech tree. The Tiger II with the KV or KWK 43, a long 88, has a reload of 8.5 seconds. That is a reload advantage of 43% compared to you. And not even talking about the nearly 60% loading advantage of the Carnarvon. So, yeah, that gives you an impression. Surprisingly is in this respect the turret rotation with 18 degrees per second, which is kind of average. And you actually beat again the IS-6 by quite a bit. Just the T32 outclasses you by 33% with 24 degrees per second turret rotation speed. Then the gun depression. Minus 10 degrees is fantastic. Just the Germans have less with minus 8 and the IS-6 has disastrous minus 3. The gun elevation, however, is not really great with 15 degrees. The T32 and the IS-6 together with the Carnarvon have 20 degrees, and you share this with the T29 and the German King Tigers. The elevation speed is average with 4 degrees. Again, just the Carnarvon has kind of a stabilizer, I guess, with 4.5 degrees, which makes a little bit for a difference. But again, the gun handling overall is kind of average for a really big gun. Now let's talk about the ammunition, and we have 3 shell types. The first shell type is the stock T14E3 APHE shell, and that shell received a massive buff. I will come to this in a moment. It's a simple APHE shell, as I just mentioned, and it's 23 kilogram heavy with an initial muzzle velocity of 944 meters per second, which is not really slow, but it really seems slow, especially at this battle rating. And the initial penetration is not that bad with 247 millimeters. And then you actually kind of keep the penetration 218 millimeters at 1,000 meters, and even at 2,000 meters you can punch through 191 millimeters. So in the overwhelming majority of cases you just have to use this shell and you don't need any kind of other shell type, which is good because the other 2 shell types are not that convincing. Now let's talk about the damaging effect, and with the introduction of the T34, this kind of APHE shell, high caliber, together with the stock shell of the M103, got a massive buff to their damaging effect. They have a lot of spalling and fragmentation effect, and especially in comparison to the APHE shell from the King Tiger, this shell just simply does much more damage, at least in the overall damaging cone. Where APHE shells are superior are in terms of killing the crew and also spreading in all directions. So when you just miss the ammo rack, you most likely deal no damage, whereas an APHE shell can splash backwards and still ignite the ammunition. But overall, this shell is fantastic. You have 120 millimeters of caliber, you will penetrate most of the cases. This shell does have quite the same penetration as, initially at least, as the APHE shell, the upgrade from the 10.5 centimeter King Tiger. But that's not all. You actually can nowadays penetrate the lower plate of any kind of King Tiger chassis or even the Yak Tiger and so on. You can just simply punch through and deal massive damage. you will be surprised how much crew members and modules you will just simply kill. And another kind of feature that AP shots have over APHE shells is that they simply don't explode. That means if you shoot somebody through the engine, you will penetrate the engine compartment and still penetrate into the fighting compartment, whereas an APHE shell just simply explodes near the engine, will probably letting it explode or just set it on fire. And most tanks have kind of an internal armor layer in front of the engine that protects the crew, at least initially, from the fire effect, and also fuel tank fires and also shrapnels if you get penetrated there. That's the reason actually why a lot of American medium and heavy tanks at higher tiers are less armored at the side and the rear than they are on the crew compartment. The second stock shell type is the M73HE round, which is kind of a bit disappointing. It is also a 23 kilogram heavy warhead, also traveling at 944 meters per second, which is actually not that bad for a HE shell. It contains 2.38 kilograms of TNT equivalent and has just a penetration value of 28 millimeters. That is disappointing. Let's compare this to the Russian 122 millimeter and also the German 128 millimeter HE rounds, which have combined 36 millimeters of penetration. All the more surprising is it when you compare it to the M103's 120 millimeter gun, to which this gun shares the gun sound, which the HE shell delivers 39 millimeters of penetration from its 4,650 grams of TNT equivalent high explosive filling. But in fact, I have to say, you initiate purely with the caliber of the AP shell, also hull break on lightly armored vehicles, and you also can mow them down with your turret mounted 50 caliber machine guns. Like, the arrangement of those is quite similar to the T29, so you really do not need this actually relatively bad performing HE round. The third and final shell type is the T17E1 APCR shell, which is a 13 kilogram heavy warhead that travels at fantastic 1264 meters per second. It's much easier to lead, however you really don't need it, despite being the actual second best APCR round in the game. It's very similar to the 90mm APCR on the M47 Pattern 2. You simply don't need it. The damage effect is much less than, for example, on the AP shell. So just a quick side note, it's a tier 2 upgrade, but you really do not need it. Before we talk about the final stat card and the kind of the final gameplay that I want to show you, I wanted to show you simply the results of this battle. It's really nothing too unusual. The tank can take a lot of damage, the tank can stay in the battle, the gun is powerful, you don't really need to switch ammunition types, the package is just all around really great. So, and that finally brings us to the last battle. And when we compare the shells, it becomes really obvious that the tank is somewhat limited, and before the actual buff to the AP shell, I would have simply said the tank has a lot of disadvantages in terms of firepower. But now with this, it actually it can deliver the pain. Again, 247 millimeters of penetration is the same as on the 10.5 centimeter King Tiger with the upgraded APHE shell. The as I mentioned, the HE shell is really not that convincing, although amongst the non-premium heavy tanks still one of the better ones. And the APCR, again, most of the time is useless. But let's have a look at this battle here on Volokholamsk in realistic battles, and while it was not the one with the most kills, I think it shows the perfect combination of firepower, protection, and overall result. I can go into the battle and my commander was just taken out, and it really doesn't bother me. I have enough crew members left, and I was lucky here that I had no ammunition in the turret, because this whatever penetration round it was, might have been an APCR round even, did really no damage. One thing that I have to hasten to add here, I think the tank is not as good in 90% of the cases as the fantastic T29, which just simply has better killing power with the fantastic APHE round. and has kind of a faster reload. But against RE251s from the side, it's still good enough. And I have to say, the spalling effect is really, really awesome. Again, in this respect, it is personal preference what you really want to use. And again, APHE has certain advantages and disadvantages compared to APHE, which in my opinion is still one of the best rounds in the game in terms of bringing you the killing results. But the results with this buffed AP round is really nothing that you really can complain about it. The next part are the repair times. They are not as good as on the T29, but still better than, for example, on the Germans. And here you can see me doing another tactic using the 50 cals. I actually deny my opponent vision by just kicking up dust and, you know, just blind him. Also, you can destroy AAA vehicles or even RE251s if they're side on. And now I'm in a very good spot. I'm practically hull down when engaging those King Tigers. Let's have a look how the shell performs against a King Tiger, and we can see gunner, loader, commander, cannon breach and horizontal turret drive. This King Tiger has now a lot of difficulties and a lot of repair time in front of him. And that's mostly the death sentence for a King Tiger. They can't repair in time, and the repair time is just good enough to then kill them. And yes, you also can overmatch the turret roof of a King Tiger, but this was just simply a turret front penetration just above the gun mantle. So, and now we are just simply waiting here of what the enemy is doing. I don't know what to think about the Germans, but that was a bad shot. But they just have so many difficulties to deal with the IS-6 and the T-29. The T-34 is a more balanced tank in this respect, but it still is an awful amount of work to take out. That was a nice long range shot, and this is ammunition exploded on a whirlwind, so good result right there. And yeah, that was practically the battle, and this is how it happens lately. So if you want to spade the tank or trying to get it, at the moment I think it performs really nicely, and the teams you get in perform really well, especially against the Germans. You have a damn hard time still trying to deal with something like an IS-6. Going through the turret front, yeah, that's maybe something where you could use the APCR, but overall, you know, try to go for the side shot. And now I'm just advancing. I have 4 kills in the back, that's a good result, I didn't die. I always try to preserve my tanks, and I mean, yeah, certain people try to rush in, try to get as many points as possible to also jump into a plane. And yeah, I should have pulled the trigger right there. That was an RE251, but I was kind of confused as there was also a blue writing above this tank. And again, I could have had a shot here, but you know, I thought that the tanks in the surrounding would have been able to deal with this RE251, which actually made a fantastic last stand. So I'm actually waiting here and trying to advance to this tank. I want my ace, I want my 5th kill, but what to do right now? I'm looking at the minimap. I saw that somewhere in the wood over there a marker popped up, but my only hope to get now the 5th kill is to wait for somebody that respawns. And at that time, just 2 players were left. There were just 2 players left on the entire enemy team, and the battle took not that long. And I see them already respawning. Try to aim, try to judge the distance. And that was a nice hit on the Kugelblitz. The Kugelblitz is one of those AAAs, you know, it's based on the Panzer IV chassis, so you really do not have a hull break mechanic there. And I actually ignored the King Tiger, which just has a non-penetration hit. And again, I reduced the crew on the Kugelblitz to 2. So in this respect, yeah, I was not really sure what to think about. The King Tiger hit again. and I switch aim to the Google Blitz again. And there we have the kill. By the way, the gun sound on this gun is just fantastic. And now I actually, I paid the price for my cockiness. I should have aimed at the King Tiger, but I just wanted to make sure that I get 5 kills. And that is the effect. That was one of the rare occasions where I practically got one-shotted from the front by a long 88. Let's have a quick look at the post-battle results for this particular battle. I got 5 kills and 1 assist and no further interactions, and that let me receive 25,530 silver lines and 3,052 modification research points. A few points go to the A26B50, but just there were not too many. No boosters applied with a premium account. So that is the T34. Again, overall it doesn't feel as awesome as the T29, but it's certainly not a bad tank. So that's it for me today. I hope you enjoyed this tank review. I hope you could learn something from it. Let me know in the comment section if you have additional impressions, ideas how to play it or how to counter it. And yeah, as usual, thanks for watching, thanks for listening. Please give this video a like if you did, subscribe if you want to see more, and we will see each other in the skies and on the battlefields of War Thunder.